I'm University of Illinois Extension's Todd Gleason. This is the FarmDoc Daily Webinar. Thank you for joining us today. 10 years of PCM data. What actually pays on your farm? We're joined by Gary Schnitkey, agricultural economist here on the Urbana-Champaign campus of the U of I, and Laura Gentry from the Illinois Corn Growers Association. Thank you both for being with us. I think I want to start, actually, if we can do a quick little bit about the PCM data itself, because we are celebrating 10 years. Laura, can you tell me about the beginning of this project?
Well, sure. So Precision Conservation Management is a program. It's a farmer service program that was developed by the Illinois Corn Growers Association. It was really designed to help farmers address an issue that they had, which was that, 10 years ago when the Illinois nutrient loss reduction strategy was coming out and farmers knew that they were going to be expected to reduce their nitrogen and phosphorus losses from their fields, there were practices that we knew from that science assessment in the nutrient loss reduction strategy that helped to address nitrogen and phosphorus losses from our fields, but very little understanding about how those practices impacted real world Illinois corn and soybean farmers. And that's why we developed the Precision Conservation Management Program, is to help us to take a very data-focused approach to understanding how these practices, especially these in-field practices of cover crops, nitrogen management, and reducing tillage, would help to both address the issues or address the goals of the nutrient loss reduction strategy, but also how they would impact our farm families and those farm incomes.
And then, Gary, you are charged with analyzing this data. I want to talk, and we'll talk more about that in just a second, but how important is the collection of data over a 10-year period?
No, that's an amazing sort of thing. And PCM, with its ability to look at both in the environmental side and the cost and return side, is unique. I'm not aware of any place where we collect field data, so all the PCM farmers provide their field data to us, every pass that's made on that field, and then from that we can do environmental benchmarks, and also we calculate economic results from that as well.
Thank you very much, both of you. I think, Laura, we'll start with you if you want to take control of the slideshow, and we'll shut off our cameras until we get back to the question and answer session. And do remember that if you want to ask a question, you can do that easily enough. Not hard to do. So go ahead and ask those questions. We'll get them answered along the way. Now, here's Laura Gentry to start our program.
Thank you all very much. The practice we call the three types of conservation practices that we address in Illinois and the Precision Conservation Management Program. We call those our practice standards in PCM, and they are in-field management practices that we know are effective for addressing nutrient losses, but they're also important for reducing soil erosion so that we're retaining the most valuable topsoil that we have, our beautiful topsoil that we have in Illinois. And it's also important for addressing climate issues, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And those three practice standards, what we'll be talking about today's webinar, are tillage, cover crops, and nitrogen management. We look at these for corn and for soybean, except for nitrogen management. That's only for corn, of course. And we are showing you today our high SPR. That's our high soil productivity rating soil results. We have about 50% of our fields or a little bit more than 50% of our Illinois fields in PCM are high SPR, meaning they rate above a 135 index rating, and about half are below that. So it's important to show the low SPR too. You can find those on our website. Here in about 3 weeks, we'll be publishing those low SPR results. So we're going to take a look now at our tillage data. We're going to start with our corn data. As a quick 1-minute reminder here about what we're really talking about with tillage. There's so many different tillage tools. They do different types of disturbance. Some are deep rippers. Some are very light surface. Some are just really for sizing up our crop residues. So quickly talking about our tillage classes within the tillage benchmark, we have, of course, no-till, which is exactly what it says it is. We're not doing any tillage. We're planting directly into the crop residue with a no-till planter. And we have strip tillage, which of course is just tillage in the crop row using a strip till bar. There's many different types, and they do various different types of erosion and have different types of ratings in terms of how much tillage they're doing and the level of disturbance. We have one pass light. That means one low disturbance tillage pass. This is often like a turbo till, a vertical till, something that's designed to do very light, just sort of break up a crust on the soil surface, often used to size up the crop residue as well, so that it just warms and dries up the soil, especially early in the spring. 2-pass light is just 2 of those tillage passes anytime during the season. So it could be 1 in the fall and 1 in the spring, or 2 in the spring. We have 2-pass moderate. That means that there are 2 tillage passes. One is low disturbance and one is a higher disturbance, something that might have coulter, something that, or likely has like a chisel plow, would be a 2-pass moderate. And then everything else, anything with more than 2 tillage passes of any kind, we call 2+ pass tillage. And we apply these classes to both corn and to our soybean fields. Looking at the impact of those strategies, we assign costs to each one of these different types of implements as we are looking at our whole farm, we do it field by field, the different cost benchmarks and economic costs associated. All right, so with 10 years of data, you can do some really remarkable things, and we love looking at the data in different ways to better understand different elements. But the year 2024 was a really interesting year. For one thing, it was one of the worst in terms of farm economics that we have seen since the year 2010. It was a year with high crop inputs and lower grain prices for corn and for soybean. Balancing that out, though, on the good side, we did have very high yields, just beautiful yields last year. So 2024 was a special year. There was also a lot of uncertainty in markets around tariffs and around some of the programs that farmers have traditionally relied on in terms of USDA funding with EQIP or CSP, and also with some of the climate smart grants that were funded that farmers had been told that would be available to them. So 2024 was a special year. And we think that we see the potential for some of these same elements of uncertainty or risk being played out again in the 2025 year. So these are some things that we wanted to look at. And environments like this, as Gary had just said, really make a very strong case for being a low-cost producer. And so what we did was we just pulled out the 2024 data and we just looked at the net return, or what we call the operator and land return. And that is the net return on a per acre basis for the fields. And we rank those from the least profitable to the most profitable. And we pulled out for that 2024 year, for all of the cornfields that were in a high SPR soil rating, we pulled out the lowest 25% and the highest 25%. And we're looking at the differences between them across the state of Illinois. Of course, there are elements of luck. It's partly luck related to good yields. But as we're looking at some of the other costs, we are seeing that there was definitely some strategy in the farmers who ended up in the highest 25%. So what we see here are that yields, the difference there, we had about a 37 bushel per acre difference in average between the average for the lowest 25% and the highest 25%. For costs, though, this is really important. We're seeing that there were big differences in costs. There was about $115 difference between farmers who were in the highest 25% of the most profitable fields, they were $115 on average lower than those farmers who were in the lowest or the bottom 25% in terms of net returns. And that was largely because of direct costs. That is related to those fertilizer costs, seed costs, and other agricultural inputs that are related to direct costs. So seed chemicals, fertilizer, also crop or grain drying, storage, and crop insurance are the things that go into direct costs. And those farmers in the bottom 25% are paying more in terms of those direct costs on a per acre basis. Power costs were not that different between the bottom 25% and the top 25%. And overhead are just a plugged-in cost that would be the same for both across the spectrum of all of those fields for that year. It was about $55 per acre. And that includes hired labor, our insurance, buildings, and any interest on loans. So those are our overhead costs. Can we go to the next category there? So our operator and land return, what a swing between our bottom 25% at $78 per acre and our highest 25% at $366 per acre. So what we see are that in that bottom 25%, you can see the percentages of the different tillage types that were represented on the average there, as well as in the highest 25%. And the real message there is that we see more farmers using no-till corn. And it was just it was a good strategy for farmers in 2024. Using no-till corn was, and it may be a good strategy again. And you may look at that strip till being represented very high in the bottom 25%. And I do need to note that there are farmers in specific PCM regions across Illinois who about 2 or 3 years ago started using no-till with or without a strip freshener. They're still refining those systems. They're making very high yields, but they are learning how to get their costs down in terms of both power, but also especially their direct costs. So it's not that strip till isn't a great strategy for a lot of farmers. It's just that many of the farmers are new to that and they are refining that system. This is looking at our bottom 25% and top 25% in 2024. Now let's look at just those top 25% most profitable fields from 2024, again for corn on high SPR fields. And let's take a look at those different top 25% tillage strategies. And it's so interesting here. This 2024 was a year where we turned a corner in terms of tillage strategies, and no-till really did shine in 2024 in that particular cost environment, which we see being reflected in many ways in the 2025 year as well. So no-till did very well, even though it wasn't the highest yielding, but it still produced well, 260 bushels per acre. Strip till generally does have the highest yields of all of our tillage strategies, but it also has the highest power costs usually. And then we have 1-pass light and 2-pass moderate. 1-pass light is usually our most profitable tillage strategy for corn on high SPR fields in most years. Let's take a look and do a comparison. This is showing all years of our data set. So it's not just high SPR, and it's showing all years, and it's not just the top 25%, it's the entire population of fields. So what we see here is a comparison between no-till and 1-pass. This is 1-pass light specifically. So you do have this was for all years, again, no-till versus 1-pass light. And this is our full data set on high SPR cornfields. We do see a little lower yields, 3 bushel per acre lower yields, but it's only a $5 per acre difference. And friends, if you look hard at all, you can find a program out there that will pay you anywhere from $5 to $10 to $15 per acre. Illinois Corn and Precision Conservation Management offers $5 and $10 per acre to reduce your tillage down to no-till. So you can easily make up that $5 per acre difference there. And there were, of course, many farmers who did better than $221 bushels per acre, because again, there's no real substitute for having competitive yields. That's just showing again the direct costs and power costs and the overhead costs, and again that $5 per acre difference. Now, what we're doing is we're pulling the no-till out, and we're just looking at these full width. We're comparing full width tillage passes across our full data set, and we're looking at 1-pass light, 2-pass light, 2-pass moderate, and then 2 or more than 2 tillage passes. And it's just such a stark difference to look here. We do see that it is not the highest yields for 1-pass light, and that's okay. We try again and again to emphasize that there's a lot more to being profitable than high yields. We need to have competitive yields, but always striving for the highest yield often is at the sacrifice of our actual farm profitability. So what we see is that our direct costs for 1-pass, and then as we move into 2 and more tillage, our direct costs go up, as do our power costs. So our total non-land costs just go up and up and up. And it's going up at a greater rate than is our bushel increases, or what we're getting in total revenue. So essentially, farmers who did more tillage on the whole, for our whole data set across our high SPR fields, are actually having lower profitability than farmers who are using 1-pass light. And we have seen this for the past at least 3 years in our full data set. We're going to take just a quick minute. We really do like to emphasize our conservation metrics. This particular webinar every year that we do with FarmDoc is usually to emphasize our financials, but we would like to take a moment and show you how our different tillage passes across all of our full data set for all years is doing in terms of soil erosion, what we call our soil carbon index, and then our greenhouse gas emissions. So what we see up here for soil loss. So one thing we have to caution everyone about when making comparisons within our data set is that we are not looking at small fields where we have many different plots that are put across the same soils and get the same weather patterns, the same management. Not at all. Ours is the opposite of that. We have a lot of variability in our data set. It's real world soils, real world weather, real world management, but it also gives us a lot of variability. So what we see here between this 0.68 and 0.63 between no-till and strip-till, that's really just looking at a 0.7 to a 0.6 difference. Very little likelihood that those are actually statistically significant differences when you consider all the variability in our data set. But this jump up to 1.9 or 1.8 tons per acre of soil loss that we're seeing when we move into 1-pass light, 2-pass light, and more, those are real differences. So we know that we're seeing lower soil erosion with our no-till and strip-till fields, just as you would expect. The soil carbon index is really just a likelihood that soil carbon is increasing. It goes from -1, meaning you are almost certainly reducing soil carbon in your field, to a +1, meaning you are almost certainly increasing your soil carbon in your soils and those fields. So the higher numbers we see, of course, is for no-till and strip-till. We feel good that those farmers are increasing their total soil organic matter. We also have surveys that we conduct every year after our specialists deliver the we call them resource analysis and assessment plans. Every PCM farmer receives a RAP report from their PCM specialist in February and March. And after that, we ask them to take a survey, the farmer to take a survey. And so throughout this webinar, we'll be showing you a couple of those results. And one of the results from this year's survey showed us that 67% of the PCM respondents who are not already using reduced tillage practices are likely to reduce or eliminate their tillage. So that was, we think, a pretty significant finding. So we will leave it there, and I'll turn it over to look at some soybean tillage results.
All right. And I am going to go over the soybean tillage results. So we're going to start here at the soybeans, and we're going to do the same thing that we did last time. This is for 2024, and we're looking at the low versus the high 25%. Again, if you're looking at yields, and again, this is all fields of soybeans, 65 bushels for the low, 82 bushels for the high, so 17 bushels difference. If we look at cost, what we see is that the high 25% has lower cost, and again, much of that is in the direct cost area. $221 versus $290, so $69 difference. Here is what I would describe this as, is that if you have lower cost, you have a higher chance of getting in the top 25%, and then you have to combine that with good yields to get in the top 25%. Those good yields could be just because you had a better weather pattern than other people. But if you want to more consistently get in the top 25%, those costs, again, having low cost are key to that. Those direct costs include a bit lower fertilizer cost, a bit lower seed cost, and a bit lower herbicide cost. So it's across the board. And you could almost say that getting lower cost is a lifestyle, and you typically see that across different categories. So 65 versus 82, and then a 69 difference in direct cost, and a $74 difference in non-land cost. Again, we're looking at non-land cost. And then those two things really result in a lot of difference in operator and land return of $288 difference, combining the yield versus the cost differences. Again, as we look at tillage type, one of the things we see is that the high 25% we still see a lot of no-till, but 40% versus 60% in the low 25%. And we see more in the one-pass light and two-pass moderate systems. So that is the results from the high 25% versus low 25%. Now let's go to the 10-year results. So it's 10 years. So this, again, is dividing those up into no-till, and you can see that we have 3,691 fields in no-till. Our next highest category is one-pass light, with 1,146 fields, and then following by two-pass moderate with 1,103 fields. So if you're looking at this data, more of them are no-till than other items.
Can I ask for some clarification on that particular data point? Is that because even conventional tillage, or people who would normally do 1, 2, or more passes, actually don't till soybeans in the fall? It's not about being a no-tiller, it's about the crop, correct?
It is about the crop. So, and again, one of the things we're looking at, we see this a lot, that we will see no-till on soybeans, but then tillage on corn. So, and there's actually a relatively smaller number that do no-till on both. So if you're doing no-till, that 3,691 fields, chances are you're doing some tillage on corn. So we want to focus on two lines here, and we're going to do a little examination of this. And in particular, no-till has 68 bushel yield versus 71 for one-pass light. And then two-pass moderate has 73 bushels. So we see an advantage, or a yield advantage, for tillage in soybeans. And then if you look at no-till operator and land returns, 427 for no-till. One-pass light had 444, which is higher, and 448 for two-pass moderate. So we began to ask, well, why are we seeing that difference in no-till? And here are two things to keep in mind. And again, why do no-till soybeans have lower net returns? So if we look in 2024, this has been growing a bit over time, but just to give you a feel, back in 2020, I'm still not used to this being 2025. Back in 2020, that 10% would have been 7%. So about 10% of 2024 soybean fields were non-GMO. And most non-GMO fields use some tillage, and so they weren't not no-till. So the no-till fields were having proportionally less of these non-GMO fields. And about 1/3 of 2024 soybean fields were cover cropped. And most of the cover crop fields fall in the no-till categories. And we'll talk about the cover crops here in a minute. But let's just look at what those non-GMO fields do compared to those fields with conventional. So here's the comparison. We have a conventional versus non-GMO. We in 2025, we gave the non-GMO a $2 per bushel higher price because of the premium. We did surveys of that, and that's what we came up with for being the average premium for non-GMO. But you'll see here, non-GMO actually had a bit higher yield than our conventional, 75 versus 78, which you might attribute to a number of things, including some tillage. But you can see there that revenue was much higher for the non-GMO. Costs were about the same, bit lower direct cost, higher power cost. Again, what we saw with our non-GMO fields were that they had more tillage. In fact, if you look at it, you see that 37% of them were two past moderate. Only 12% were non-GMO, no-till, versus 48% of our conventional were no-till. And again, you're looking at a big revenue increase, which then results in non-GMO increase.
There is a question about what SPR stands for.
It's a soil productivity rating.
Yeah. And these are, and what you're showing is for highly productive soils in central Illinois on this mostly. Is that right?
All of Illinois. So, but
is it just out of the PCM data, which comes from how many acres?
So how many, Laura, how many acres are in PCM now? Let her.
We have about 480,000 acres in Illinois now.
And then also there are acres in other states as well. True, correct?
Oh, that's right. Yes. So
but
all told, we have over 600,000 acres.
Yeah. And those are in Kentucky and Nebraska and Missouri. Am I right there?
Well,
Laura?
we just added Missouri, but yes. Yep. Kentucky and Nebraska. And soon we'll be adding in more Kentucky and Missouri fields.
I do have a quick question that came in early that someone wanted to know about. Just as they drove across the state, it seemed to them that conventional tillage and management practices, of course, were the norm, and that on high PI or productivity index soils, those would be the highly productive soils in central Illinois mostly, and other places, but a lot of soils in central Illinois are where no-till is not practiced as much, and that absentee landowners may not be familiar with this as well. What do we know about the answer to that question about why it is that
so we do see in Illinois in general, I'm not going to go specifically up 557, but we do see more tillage in Illinois versus, say, Indiana and Ohio. I don't think we are that much different from Iowa.
Is the Indiana Ohio thing, is that the corn versus soybean acreage? Is it higher? Soybean acreage higher in those two states?
Soybean acres tends to be higher.
Yeah, so it would be that the clarification we talked about earlier would have an impact. That
and somewhat so they also have much tighter soils than Illinois does, and so getting on the soils where a tillage practice may be maybe harder. It's hard to know.
It would eat a lot of fuel.
It's hard to exactly know why. I would also note that that we do see yield advantage to no-till, and it's been that way for a while. So, Laura, did you have anything else that you want to add to that discussion about why we see more in Illinois?
No, nothing to add there.
But this was the comparison of conventional versus non-GMO, and you'll note here that operator and land return is much higher for our non-GMO group. Again, that's primarily due to the GMO premium per bushel. And then if we compare conventional, and here we have this question, we've also excluded cover crops from this analysis because we'll show cover crops results in a minute. Cover crops tend to have a bit higher cost, and the yield advantage is about the same when you do it properly. But here, what you see, and we're showing operator and land returns by year. We're only doing this for the last 5 years. Non-GMO comes at 659. No-till comes at 491, and one pass light comes in at 504. So we still see a bit higher operator and land returns for some tillage compared to no-till, but that diminishes quite a bit. So to summarize here, we would say no-till has slightly reduced yield versus tilled, and that may also explain why we see more of it. And again, that's probably a soils phenomena as well. No-till has a slight increase in direct cost, and no-till has slightly lower par cost, but there still seems to be a yield and profitability advantage to doing some tillage for soybeans. So somewhat surprisingly, our results would say that no-till going into corn doesn't have a profit advantage, whereas no-till going into soybeans probably has a little disadvantage. But again, that's where we're at right now. So we're going to now turn to cover crops, and we're going to start with those ahead of corn. So, Laura, you're going to take this?
Yep. I'll take the corn slides. So taking a look here, and if you'll advance over to the next one for me, that we're looking at cover crops ahead of corn. This is for our full 10-year data set. This is all high SPR soils, as everything here. And we are looking at just number of fields. You can see we have almost 6,900 no cover crop fields versus 750 overwintering and 330 winter terminal. And if we just bump down here to the operator and land return, well, first let's look. There is a yield difference here. We do see a yield reduction with overwintering and winter terminal to some extent. And then when we look at just operator and land return, we see this range, and the straight acre weighted average, if you want that, is just right in the middle of this $50 per acre range. So it would be $299 for overwintering and $325 for no cover crops. But it represents that there's such a big range of ways to grow cover crops, ranging from really pretty cheap to really quite expensive. A $50 range there is what we assign to that. But essentially, what we see here is that these results are really similar to our previous year's findings. We are having a hard time showing the profit advantage to growing cover crops. There's just more challenges, especially ahead of corn, in terms of the species that we have available to us. You can go to the next slide there, Gary. The agronomics are just more difficult ahead of corn. With cover crops, corn itself is a little less tolerant and resistant to the stress relative to soybean. And we do see that the cover crops can take up the nitrogen that we put out there for the corn and can leave the corn needing more additional nitrogen. So there's timing aspects to it, labor aspects to it. But we are seeing certain regions in Illinois where cover crops are actually not just doing as well, but doing better on the average. And we're seeing these in pockets across Illinois. We recently produced a regional data summary for every PCM region in our program, and this was one of the most interesting finds. It was around cover crops. We observed that there are PCM regions, and they coincide with areas where we are seeing active, engaged, independent cover crop seed salespeople or seed dealerships. Those areas, we are seeing farmers doing quite well with cover crops. They're both having a yield advantage and a price advantage in certain specific regions. So I'll stop with that and turn it over to Gary to look at cover crops ahead of soybean.
Gary, we do have a question I think you'll want to answer now. Do you have thoughts about why the results show better yield and profitability for tillage going into soybeans compared to no-till?
So I have thoughts. I don't know if we can show them, but remember, most of our fields are going from corn into soybeans. So it would appear to me that there's some advantage to breaking up that corn fodder out there as far as yields. Again, I'm not an agronomist. That's just me looking in. And if you look at the other way, most of our fields are going from soybeans to corn, which have a lot less cover on them. So that might be the reason. Again, one of the things that we're going to begin more and more looking at is like a systems approach and seeing if we can find difference in corn versus soybean systems, because farmers do compare. We so far have looked at these as a single crop basis. Anyway, we're going to go on to cover crops for soybeans, and here we have 5,344 fields with no cover crops. We have a lot of overwintering and very few winter terminal. Winter terminal was one of those that happened early on in the thing, and you're seeing that less so now. We also do actually see more winter terminal going into corn, and there does seem to be some advantages for that system. And we need to look at that some more.
Just for clarification's sake, is winter terminal when you plant a crop in the fall that dies
that
with
would
the
be,
winter, so it doesn't come back at all? Is that correct?
That would be right. So winter terminal would be something like a oats or a radish that doesn't come back, or the winter kills it.
Survive the winter.
Yep. Overwintering would be a lot of that in our system would be cereal rye would be the prime example of that, where you plant it in the fall and then it grows in the spring, and sometimes you plant it in the fall and it doesn't come up to the spring as well, which is the way some of that goes. But overwintering, we have done more detailed breakouts of this system. And here's what we would say: as people get experience with this sort of system, there is a recipe for it. And that recipe, if you exclude all those that aren't following the recipe, the yields for in soybeans would be about the same. We would still have a bit higher cost for the soybean system with cover crops, and that would be primarily because of the seed cost planting, or the cost associated with planting it. And we still do see, though, quite a bit of a advantage of cover crops in reducing soil loss, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and all important for Illinois. A lot of work showing that cover crop system in soybeans really does result in much lower nitrogen effluent from those fields, or getting into tile and moving through. That was Lowell Gentry has shown that quite convincingly, that cover crops do reduce that. But as far as that recipe, and we have that recipe up on the PCM website. You plant that cover crop after the corn harvest. Most of our fields are going from corn to soybeans, so you plant it after the corn is harvested. And the methods varies from broadcast with dry fertilizer, and that's a very low cost way of throwing cover crops out there. You have poorer establishment, but then again, you're harvesting the cereal rye either. Broadcast with light tillage, and that has better establishment. Drill or plant, and this one is slow, and many farms don't have a drill, so that can make it more costly. And then some are working with attachments on the combine, which would eliminate a tillage pass, and it would be generally lower cost. You plant then soybeans early. No matter what you do, we find in this data, planting soybeans earlier has a yield advantage, and that's been happening in Illinois, and it's the same with cover crops versus not cover crops. And we see some people terminate it before planting and some people after planting. The after planting, there's pros and cons to each one. We see some with the after planting eliminating herbicide passes and having a reduction in herbicide costs and an increase in weed control. Again, those costs generally don't outweigh the cost associated with the seed and then any item associated with the seed. But we are getting close to having that system compete again, and there are incentive programs that would get it above that. So we asked our PCM farmers, what are you thinking about tillage? And one of the things they're saying is 67% of PCM farms who don't already use reduced tillage practice are likely to reduce or eliminate tillage. And 70% of farmers who don't already use cover crops on their whole farm are likely to try and expand those cover crop acres. Again, we see that interest there. One of the things I would also mention that you have to factor in that this is a systems approach, and if you include a tillage before soybeans, you're adding complexity to the planting period and may delay that planting of that crop. So we will continue to work on it, but those are what our results are showing now as far as tillage and cover crops. So we're going to turn now to nitrogen use data. And Laura, take it away. Or was I going to do this?
Thanks a lot. Okay, let's turn it over. And I'll take part of this, Gary, and turn it over to you for the second half. Is that good?
That's good.
All right, let's go to the first slide there. Well, the next slide. Thanks. Okay. So set up the same as all of ours. We did add a nitrogen use efficiency in pounds of nitrogen fertilizer applied per bushel of grain produced. Up there is the very top row. And we are showing our 5 different nitrogen timing classes up here at the top as our column headers. Greater than 40% of the nitrogen applied in the fall. Most of the nitrogen applied as pre-plant or as starter, or most of the nitrogen applied as side dress. Roughly 50-50 between pre-plant and side dress of that total nitrogen application rate versus the last one here is our 3-way split. That means that less than 40% of the nitrogen was applied in the fall, but some amount was applied in the fall. And then the rest of it was split both between pre-plant, starter, and side dress. And we see those are our different categories. And when we talk about this we're referring to the total nitrogen application that includes any nitrogen that's applied with MAP or DAP fertilizer or with any of our herbicides as carriers. So you can see our number of fields here. We had the most fields falling into the greater than 40% fall category. And across our whole 10-year data set, we see and we've seen something very similar to this, essentially the same pattern every year, is that it is this mostly pre-plant category that is the most profitable. And again, it's not the category or the class, it's not the nitrogen management strategy with the highest yields. It's actually the lowest yields, and yet it's still very good yields for these high SPR soils, and it's these lower costs that we're seeing that are bringing it here and making it the most profitable. So that's the whole data set. So let's go on to our next slide here.
And let me take it away here. One of the things we break out every year is corn nitrogen rate, and this would be pounds of actual N. So less than 150, 151 to 175. So this would be that the application rate of 151 to 175. That includes not only like if we make a nitrogen pass, but anything in DAP and MAP. 176 to 120. So the two middle ones, 151 to 200, that range is where we would see the MRTN falling. And then we have the two higher classes there, 201 to 25 and less than 20, and then greater than 225. Over the entire 10 years, you will note that those two middle classes have the highest returns, 371, 365, and then they fall off 354 to 346 as we move forward. One of the things that I would also note about this, if you look at our application methods, mostly fall, many of our mostly fall also tend to have, you would notice a bit more of them applying more nitrogen, and they also have the disadvantage of most of them also put a nitrogen inhibitor on, which has an additional cost. So there you can see that breakdown. Again, the MRTN would be 151 to 200. Those two groups in sort of the middle there, not at the high end, not those over 200. And by the way, the results are sort of the same across time. You see here the highs in the greens and the reds being the low, and we see most of the time it's falling in that 151, 175, 176 to 200 area. And then if you look over there at the greater than 225, that group often hits their lowest as far as those turns over time. We also broke this out by year, so you can see it from a graphical standpoint. And so this is from a graphical standpoint with that dark blue bar being less than 150. I highlighted it there, and that 2020 really stands out in that year. For whatever reason, that group got hit in that year. We see the greater than 225 being below most of the time, with a couple years when it was above. And then there is the 176 to 200, sort of this consistent performance sort of there in the middle. And then the lower group has a little bit less consistency, I would guess. So sort of gives you a feel for where those things are looking at. So what our PCM farms are saying, 67%, again, the same two that we said before, and 8% of the farm who don't already use MRTN are likely to apply using the MRTN rate. So, and again, that has been a consistent sort of thing that happens over time. One of the things you'll notice is that cover crops and even no-till in certain cases it may be a little bit less profitable, and we're going to see some results where we have some programs that help farms meet those. So you want to talk about the incentive programs, Laura?
Thank you, Gary. Sure. So just like a lot of farmers in 2024 and 2025 who are responding to some of the market uncertainties right now, we as a program staff at the Precision Conservation Management Program, we have also had a couple of curveballs thrown at us. And as far as our funding, but we, as far as our federal funding that was available to PCM farmers, but we have wonderful program partners with PepsiCo, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, the Farmers for Soil Health, and our newest PCM partner, the Kentucky Distillers Association in Kentucky in the Bourbon region there, who are stepping in to help our farmers continue to do the great work that they're doing and to receive compensation and just to be able to receive some of the benefits for the good outcomes that they're producing on their farms. And so you can see here that the Farmers for Soil Health there on the left, that is just for cover crops, and it is a 3-year program. Farmers sign up to grow cover crops on a field or multiple fields for 3 years, and you can see the tiered payment strategy there for $25 for year 1, $15 in year 2, and $10 in year 3. And then with the help of our PepsiCo, NIFWIF, or National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and Kentucky Distillers Association partners, we are also able to offer some really great soil health incentives, the same incentives we have been offering in previous years. So we're grateful for that, and we're looking forward to some good news from USDA about some more funding that will be opening up for our PCM farmers in the near future there as well. So thank you all very much for continuing to make PCM a great program. You can see our QR code there if you're a farmer in one of our regions. And if you can go to the next slide there, you can get an idea of our regions with our specialists. And if you're in one of our PCM regions or in Nebraska, Kentucky, or Missouri, and you'd like to join PCM, reach out to us. We'd love to work with you. Just go to our website, precisionconservation.org, and we will be in touch with you. Thanks to our PCM partners.
Yeah, so I would read through all of those, but there are a lot of partners there. Yes. So thank you to all of the partners. You can see that list of PCM partners. And of course, thank you to Laura Gentry at the Illinois Corn Growers Association. You can contact Laura at lgentry@ilcorn.org. And Gary Schnitkey, of course, you can contact as well. Just search him out, Gary Schnitkey. I'm going to guess, Gary, that you're the first one that comes up in a search online under Google, so you can find his address. Is it G Schnitkey without the Y?
It's Schnitkey without the Y.
Oh, it's just Schnitkey without the Y. If you know how to spell Schnitkey, but you might have looked that up at illinois.edu. We'd also like to thank our FarmDoc sponsors. They include the TI Center for Farmland Research, CoBank, Compeer Financial, Corteva AgriScience, Farm Credit Illinois, Growmark, the Illinois Soybean Association, and of course the Illinois Corn Growers Association. Our educational partners include the College of Agricultural, Consumer, and Environmental Sciences, the Department of Agricultural and Consumer Economics, University of Illinois Extension, the Gardner Agricultural Policy Program, and FBFM. That's the Farm Business Farm Management Service across the state of Illinois. We thank them. And then, of course, if you want to see this again, you can always scan that QR code. That'll visit you to farmdocdaily.illinois.edu, or you can just go to YouTube to watch it again at youtube.com/@FarmDoc, and you'll find all kinds of things there, including the 5-minute Farm Docs. Those are great little Farm Doc updates, and the podcasts that I produce for the radio programs, including the Closing Market Report. That's the daily program at willag.org, WILL AM 580, and Commodity Week, along with the Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction podcast, are all on that same page for you to find. Again, that's youtube.com/@FarmDoc. We have a couple of other questions, I think, to answer here. Do you know or have Inui's nitrogen use efficiencies for application rates broken out by corn?
We have those. Laura, we have those, but we didn't put them on the slide, I don't believe. I don't know. We could calculate those pretty straightforwardly. So
we could do that.
Those. Sometimes they're a little bit less. we have presented them as both NUEs and also just as straight nitrogen rates, both ways. And what you see is that when it's broken out by NUE, it's the farmers who are making higher yields that are applying higher rates of nitrogen. So their nitrogen use efficiencies are usually pretty good. Those farmers are often in the 1.0, 0.9 pounds of nitrogen per bushel range.
And then there was a question about something you said during this webinar, Gary, as it's related to non-GMO soybeans. They want to know whether he was misunderstanding or if there was analysis or whether this was conjecture when you said that the non-GMO, and this was on the page, the reason that there was a 78 3-bushel difference better for non-GMO than conventional soybeans might be because of the tillage that was being done with them. Is that conjecture, analysis, or data analysis?
No. So what we did see is higher yields for the non-GMO group. And it is also true that more of those had 2-pass systems than any other item. And no, we did not break out by, we could break this out by do-till and 2-pass systems and see if there was a yield difference, but we did not do that and didn't present that today.
And finally, just one last question as we're running out of time here in the last minute. If you pull up slide number 7, you might do that. It shows that one pass has a higher rate of soil loss. Do we know why that was the case? And it's probably the PDF was on 7, so it's probably earlier than that, more like 4.
Was that for corn?
Yes.
Oh, so this is, again, this goes back to that idea of there's a lot of variability. And so it's 1.9 for 1-pass light versus 1.8 for 2-pass light. That 0.1 ton per acre difference is almost certainly not a significant difference. And so we would say, and even for and then the 1.6. And a lot of times too, we need to remember that the topography, the rolling nature of these fields, it is a part of the calculation for soil loss. And farmers who have those fields that have greater roll, more topography, are more likely to put them into lower tillage classes. They're more likely to put them into 1-pass or no-till and do less tillage on them. But even still, they have that working against them in the calculation for the soil erosion models. So those fields are going to, regardless of tillage, have some level of erosion just as a result of the higher topography in those fields. And it's also, soil type is also factored into that. So higher soils with more silt and more erodible soils are going to have a higher estimated soil loss than a field that's not got as much silt.
Laura, thank you, by the way, for joining us today. I really appreciate that. Gary Schnitkey, thank you for being here. Of course, this has been a FarmDoc Daily Webinar. I'm University of Illinois Extension's Todd Gleason. We also thank Jim Baltz, who's behind the scenes, making sure that everything looks really, really good. Again, you can find this anytime you want at farmdocdaily.illinois.edu and look for all our upcoming webinars there as well. You have a good day.